Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 181 of the show with no name. I'm your humble host, Nick, and in today's episode, we're going to be back out here at the Spangle Cemetery because I wanted to talk about a family of immigrants that are buried in this cemetery that really caught my attention when I was out here documenting this area in Spangle, Washington. And they were the Fraas family, and they were immigrants from Germany. I'm going to start out by talking about the father, Mr. Fraas. His name was Heinrich Fraas, but he went by Henry. He was born on June 14th, 1850 in Germany, and he would pass away on October 2nd, 1906 at the age of 56. Henry Fraas would marry his wife, Ernestine, and they had perhaps as many as 10 children. But according to stories passed down, many of the infants did not survive infancy. After coming to America, they lived for a time in Wisconsin. Their daughter Emma was born in 1883. According to family stories, one of the baby boys died and was buried in the East. At this point in the story, it should be told that Henry and his wife had a reputation in the German community for being witches. This is a holdover from living in Germany. In 1887, a group of people from Wisconsin came west to Spokane Falls, and many took out homesteads south of Spokane. The land was timber, scab rock, and virtually not fit for farming. But the Germans were quick to locate springs, build cabins, and make shelter for their animals. They set to work cutting timber and hewing it into lumber, which they sold. Other wood was turned into firewood. According to stories, they also built a house, barn, and root cellar near the big spring. Here, the stagecoaches and other travelers would stop, feed, and water the teams, and take a meal with the family. As they cleared timber, they turned the land into fields, which were planted into hay or alfalfa. In the year 1906, Henry was murdered outside his house while he was stooped over, cutting wood. The fair in Spokane had drawn many neighbors away from the farms. The newspaper reported that Henry was believed to be a witch and had cast a spell on his neighbors' hogs. Some of the neighbor boys had opted to hunt that day in the woods instead of going to the fair, and it was thought that perhaps a stray bullet hit him, but no one came forward. The coroner determined that Henry had been shot at a very close range with a low-caliber rifle. Whomever shot him was likely standing behind him and nearby him and over the top of him. I found a newspaper article about it that reads, "Murder mystery is yet unsolved. Farmer shot down near Spokane, either by careless boys or assassin. Was said to be a witch." According to Mr. Frost's wife, Mrs. Frost heard a shot at about 10 o'clock and claims to have heard her husband cry out for help, whereupon she ran to his assistance and found him dead. Everyone near the farm was questioned by the coroner, but no one seemed to be in the neighborhood at the time of the shooting, and this added to the mystery of the case. The bullet entered the left side of his neck and came out through his right eye, which seemed to indicate that the rifle was fired at a very close range, not only by reason of the course of the bullet, but because of the penetrating power for such a small caliber. More interesting In the 1930s, a boy living in the house that the Fraas family once lived in discovered a small caliber pistol wedged into the attic rafters in a pie plate. His wife was a suspect for a while in this murder case, but she was never convicted. His wife, Albertine Fraas, was born in Germany in March of 1850, and she married Henry Fraas in about 1873. In between 1880 and 1882, she went with her husband and children to America, settling in Wisconsin. This is only known because a daughter, Emma, was born there in 1883, and it was recorded in the Lutheran Church records. In 1887 or 1888, they headed west to Spokane, Washington. The first winter in Spangle was met with many hardships for Henry and Ernestine, as well as the other German people that began to settle in the area. That first winter in the year 1888, 3 people died because of the elements alone. There are grim stories of happenings at that farm, and Mrs. Ernestine Fraas has faced down more than her fair share of sickness, death, and difficult people with vicious stories. Many of the stories followed the German people, who were from an area where witchcraft was practiced. She had scuffles with the Native Americans who camped nearby and made loud music most of the night. When she let them know it, they showed her their feelings by one of them shooting at her with an arrow that narrowly missed her, but pinned her skirt to the side of the house. Emil Friedrich Fraas was born on July 11, 1874 in Germany, and he passed away sometime in the year 1934 here in Washington State. Emil and his brother Otto were the only sons of Heinrich and Albertine to live until adulthood. They helped their father on the family dairy and hay farm. Otto, at about the age of 21, was killed in a wagon accident, and that left Emil to help his father on the farm. Emil struggled with a form of crippling arthritis, and his sister was crippled with clubbed feet. Emil fought the pain and farmed until the end, when he died of a heart attack. He outlived his father by only a couple of years. He died at the age of 59 or 60. Interestingly, Emil's cousin, who took over the farm in 1943, also suffered from the same crippling pain and also died at approximately the same age as Emil and of a heart attack. At the time of his death, Emil had no family other than his sisters, who couldn't agree on a fair division of the property. They ended up having to sell to satisfy the majority. The family farm was lost until a cousin acquired it in 1943. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Heinrich and Ernestine's son Otto now. Otto, he was born in Germany in December of 1875, and he migrated to America in 1882 with his parents. And he worked on the family dairy and hay farm north of Spangle. While hauling a load of lumber, the wagon team got out of control and tipped the wagon over, throwing Otto onto his back with the load coming down on him. And interestingly enough, that's just one version of how Otto died. Another story explains his death as he had cancer somewhere in his back, but I was unable to confirm either one of these stories, so I don't know how he died actually. He would pass away sometime in October in the year 1901, and he was around 25 years old at the time of his death. Now, one of Otto and Emil's sisters, Hattie, was born in 1891 in Spangle, so this was just a couple years after the family settled there. And she was born with clubbed feet and struggled with it throughout her life. She lived on the family farm until the 1930s, when she moved to San Francisco. While living there, she bought registered cattle, hired a cousin to manage her family's farm, and tried to make a go of it. After returning to the area, she worked in Spokane. She was probably the most lovely woman inside and out that ever lived. A truly remarkable person. Her sisters lived with her at different times. In 1977, she would pass away. One of their other sisters, Martha Christine, was born in Spangle a year later in 1892, and she would get married to a man named August Schneider. In about the year 1917, her mother, and sisters were robbed and tied up. The thieves stole whatever they could get their hands on. Martha received the worst treatment. After that robbery, all the women left the farm, leaving Emil to keep the place up on his own. Of all the Fraas children, only one had children, and that was their other sister, Emma. Emma Ernestine was born in 1885 in Wisconsin, when her parents were in the middle of migrating to Washington State. And she would migrate with her parents to Spokane Falls in 1887. She left the farm after 1917 and lived in Spokane ever since. She would get married and have 5 children. She passed away in 1961. Heinrich and Ernestine also have an infant baby boy that's buried here at the cemetery with them. The year seems to be around 1888. Heinrich's headstone is the only headstone that is here at this cemetery, and the rest of his family is buried around here in unmarked graves, I'm led to believe. This family really caught my interest when I was researching the Spangle Cemetery. They were such an interesting family indeed, almost an Addams family type of family out here in the community of Spangle, with all the rumors that went on about them, and a lot of them had health problems and just various other things like that. I can imagine how hard it would be to live out here back in these times as it is, let alone when the rest of the community is shunning you like they got shunned quite often. It definitely gives me something to think about. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.